Hello, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome to our webinar today. We're just going to take a moment as everyone is arriving to just allow space for arrival. And so we'd love to invite you to check in the chat, just with where you're dialing in from and how you are today. So just into the type chat, if you would, that would be really lovely. Thank you everyone for checking in. It's lovely to see so many people from so many different places. And Claire?
Yeah, welcome everyone. As Aaron said, we're so happy to be back together. The last call that we've had with you and also some new folks here was just a month ago, but it seems like many things have happened in our world, and we're just really grateful to the Wellbeing Project for continuing to hold this space and host conversations for us all to gather. We have, of course, our incredible dynamic duo leading us in reflection and conversation again, Sharon and Parker, and just continue to check in with one another in the chat. We invite you to share reflections and questions, as always, in the chat as we go through the conversation. And Aaron, maybe we can talk a little bit about how this conversation is setting us up for the new year before we dive in with Sharon and Parker.
Thank you, Claire. So just a tiny little bit here. This is going to be the very first session of a 10-month journey that we are going to be doing together with Sharon and Parker. We're really excited about this, and we'll be sharing more about this at the end of the call together today. So there's more to come, and it's exciting to kick this all off. So with that, Claire, you can get us started.
Great. We thought, what better way than to start with a poem, a favorite of yours, Sharon, if you could read for us Kindness.
Thank you. And I'll just start by saying how honored I am to be with Parker always, and to be with all of you. And it's a great way to start what may prove to be yet another tumultuous, disruptive year. So this is my favorite poem. She's my favorite poet. Naomi Shihab Nye is a Palestinian American who lives in Texas. And the poem is called Kindness. Many of you may be familiar with it or parts of it. She wrote the poem apparently on her honeymoon based on an experience that actually happened. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved. All this must go. So you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and a simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness is the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow is the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Somebody gave me a quotation just yesterday that they were working with from Mr. Rogers, who Parker kindly looked it up immediately for him, because I'm like too old, frankly, to have seen him on TV originally, but apparently the late 60s when I was already in college, and then early 70s when I was in India, studying meditation was his premiere. And those of you who have access to the documentary about his life, he was really quite amazing in speaking to children about values and love and things like that. And so one of the things Mr. Rogers said was, that which is mentionable is manageable. And it points to another feeling I've had in this recent time in the States, which is so many things under the surface and kind of half hidden and simmering and about to burst forth, but not quite. Well, here they are, hatred and division and things like that. Here it is. And as awful as I found that day, there was something in me that said, okay, now we can acknowledge it and now we can work with it. And it's sort of a writ large example of what we do within ourselves, what I do within myself. It's like these various feelings and thought patterns and habits that kind of a little bit obvious but not so obvious, and when they become revealed, as uncomfortable as it can be, it's also a relief, because then things become workable. I can see more deeply into experiences. I can find often the sense of helplessness within anger, the love within grief, and things that are not so easy to discern if you're barely on the surface of understanding. So that was part of what I was going through. I love that phrase, Parker. I find it so interesting because I've used it and I've heard it so many times. I was shocked but not surprised. That incidents like this are shocking in the sense of kind of like shock trauma, but it's not necessarily a surprise if you've been paying attention. And this, of course, is coming far after, like a long period for some people of isolation, for some people of working in some really challenging circumstances, a long period for all of us of disruption and confusion. I was listening to a podcast series that I had not been listening to before, and it at one point I went back and I was looking through the various offerings, and somebody was saying 2 weeks into the pandemic and isolation, he was saying in this sort of desperate voice, I've only seen my wife and dog for 2 weeks. And I thought, 2 weeks, try 9 months, like, so of course, now I'm listening to him and it's just like, oh, this is how things are, but it's hard. It's very hard. And so I think a lot of our sense of resilience and stamina, and above all, I think a real clarity about our values is been called for, because that will be the North Star that allows us to face depletion and exhaustion and shock and distress and all of those things. And so all of that was going through me. I'll say my question, that it's the one I always go back to in really challenging circumstance, is it's basically going back to this quotation from the Buddha, who is later echoed, centuries later by Martin Luther King Jr., when he said, from the Buddha statement, hatred can never cease by hatred. Hatred can only cease by love. This is an eternal law. And so when I'm in some state of shock or distress, sometimes I say to myself, still believe that? Does that still seem to you to be the truth of things? Still think this is an eternal law in all circumstance? And so that's been an interesting part of this journey for me as well.
Thank you, Sharon. And Parker, maybe we could circle back on this question to you, because I know one of the reflections you've had is in the connection between digestion, transformation, and transcendence. I'm quoting Parker in this case, and I was hoping that you might be able to share some reflections with us on that too.
Could you just say that one more time, since I don't remember saying that? But
One of the things that you've talked about and written about is also how important it is to be where we are and to experience those things. And in that, transformation can happen, and we might potentially find transcendence.
Yeah.
And so I was hoping that you might reflect a little bit on that with us too.
It seems to me that the response to your question, Aaron, goes back to something that Sharon and her mentors have long taught us, which is be here now. Because if you're here now, you're in the only reality we've got, and reality is what's going to transform you and it'll give you a chance to transcend it as we work together to co-create a new reality. And reality is sometimes really, really hard. I love the way Naomi Shihab Nye's poem, Sharon's favorite poem, brings this home. I was particularly struck this morning when she read it by the line, "It's only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes." Well, it's only kindness that allows you to get up in the morning and dress and tie your shoes to get on with the work of the day, because the anger, the bitterness, the resentment, the fear will bring you down. And so sitting with it, for me, sometimes means being very receptive. But when I know that when there's a moment of readiness in which I need to test what's inside of me in relation to the outside world, then I need to act or to speak. And speaking is a form of action. Writing, speaking, talking with people is a form of action. Words mean something. And our great fear about speaking our words about where we stand, especially in relation to big powers or close friends and family who radically disagree. Our fear is that we're going to get slam dunked. And so one of the things I wrote about in this post that I was reading from was the number of times since I've been posting about in the past 4 years about the current administration, I will get a deeply thoughtful contribution to the conversation, which goes like this: "Go to hell." And I'm a nice Christian boy, you know, that's mean, right? But I've been answering people with a very simple thank you for your brevity and your good spelling when that applies. It doesn't always apply. And allow me to answer in kind, already there. So that's my answer, which it's interesting. It brings many of those conversations to a fruitful conclusion, which is terminus, caput, bye Felicia, without insulting anybody. And I kind of like that. So the tools of transcendence, I think, are many. They range from silence and receptivity and the kind of humility that can breed, as I realize that I am always at risk of being part of the problem, not the solution. And they range from that kind of, you know, hat in hand posture to humor, which allows you to engage another person without trying to blow them off the face of the earth, you know, with owning something about yourself, like I'm already in hell. Or that's a travel tip I've been given many times, and I've followed it often enough to know that it's no longer a tourist destination for me. So I think everybody has a different way of doing this, but what I believe in is that we must find our own ways of speaking our own truth, even when we feel at risk. And if we can lower the risk level and the fear level that's in us, as we speak our truth, we are much more likely to speak our truth in love. When I can respond to go to hell by not mouthing its equivalent, I'm somehow open up a little more compassionate channel to that person. What happens in the other person, I have no way of knowing. But I know what happens in me, and it allows me to move on.
Thank you, Parker. And for what it's worth for everyone, Parker lives in Madison and really likes living there. So not just hell. Sharon, to come back to you, one of the things you touched on is just how much we've all lived through over the past year. And one of the reflections that both of you had was that this was a good year to really start off with an invitation to really explore how we could truly be kind with ourselves, and to explore what it might look like to give ourselves the support we need, and even much more than that. And so I was wondering if you might explore that with us a little bit.
Sure. Well, one of the things I've noticed about this last 9 months or so for myself is that I've really put some time and energy into trying to be kinder to others to begin with, and that even things like I reread an email before I press send, and I think, how might this be received? It's such a terse kind of format, and or maybe they don't really need to know this about this other person or something like that. And I think that's a function of my having a sense of time and space. I'm not about to get on another airplane, for example, and so I'm taking the time and I'm using the time in that way, and I find that very fulfilling, just to be kinder and to make that my leading edge, especially because there's also a little bit of being a revolutionary there, because at least in my conditioning, cultural and familial and so on, kindness was a bit of a secondary virtue. It's like, if you can't be brilliant and you can't be courageous and you can't be wonderful, it's like, okay, be kind. It's nice. It's not great, but it's good, and yet it is of greatness. And I think if any of us recollect a time someone was especially kind to us, then we don't denigrate them. We don't feel pity for them. We feel the gift of that, and have a lot of respect for that. And so practicing kindness is a powerful thing, and I've really tried to commit to that. And I've also seen, as one does, that extending kindness can return me to a place within that is whole, that is intact, that has a sense of resource, because it's giving. It's an act of generosity, and really, it should be a reciprocal relationship. If we feel our kindness is only going in one direction, and we're not feeling or allowing in the benefit of that, thinking maybe it's selfish or it's wrong, then we're missing out on a lot. And similarly, I think it's essential that we be able to extend some kindness toward ourselves. It's like, give yourself a break. It's like, it's okay, we're going through a lot, and even if the wounds are invisible and it doesn't make sense for some others, like that you're struggling in some way, that doesn't matter. It's your own experience, and I'd say go for it. That it's very hard to allow, but our wish to be happy is really a positive thing. It's not something to be squeamish about, or to consider as selfish, because if we have a sense of inner resource, if we have a sense of wholeness, then we can give to others, and we can be kind to others, and we can care for others. And I think of this story about a friend of mine who was quite depressed, clinically depressed, and knowing her family, you could pretty well see sort of the genetic load, that she'd be given. And then she started taking medication, and regardless of, we don't need to get into the efficacy or controversies around medication, but what she said to me was really interesting. She said, I want you to know I'm taking just enough to feel better, but not enough to feel happy. And I said to her, well, if you're taking it, why not take enough to feel happy? But it's like that wasn't allowed somehow, or, or she wasn't struggling enough, or something. And so I think we have that burden as well, that we have that sense of it's not okay to be kind to ourselves, that we need to limit that. And I think that's just a big, big mistake.
Thank you, Sharon. Parker?
About happiness. I was just meditating on not enough to be really happy, and all that's behind that. Yeah, in my religious belief, I think I was created to enjoy life. I think as Naomi Shihab Nye makes clear, the kindness, a way of being in the world that might make me happy as well as other people happy, cannot bypass sadness, cannot bypass suffering. It's actually generated by sadness and suffering. So I think, generally speaking, the great American quest for happiness is framed in a way too limited way, as if it could be accomplished through external agents that kind of keep us high all the time. I think there's a psychiatric description for that. So when I say, for example, and I'm now responding in part to a question that was posed on the chat, that I'm already in hell, I'm suffering right now from the decline and even potential fall of the democracy that I cherish, and from watching a country that does not understand that for 240 years it has been, from the get-go, it destroyed the promise of democracy for a whole huge category of people of color. And that what we were looking at on January 6th was a KKK rally. It was a struggle of white supremacy against what they see as the threat that in a couple decades, this country will be predominantly people of color. I see that as a huge opportunity, as an engine of creativity, because my life has blessed me with chances to realize how generative diversity is. But that's not the way it's seen by the insurrectionists who took apart the Capitol and threatened lives, and indeed caused 5 deaths at this point. So yeah, I'm in hell, but I don't regard this particular hell as an obstacle to my happiness. I regard my honesty about it, my effort at honesty. I can never be sure that I've achieved it. My effort at honesty to be part of the path to happiness, to the kind of happiness that allows me to say, I am all of the above. I am my own, speaking of clinical depression, I am my own 3 deep dives into clinical depression, a person who has spent many days and weeks wondering if this was the moment to end it all. In my 40s and in my 60s, I am that person, as well as a person who has a few gifts and who has attempted to tie his shoes every morning to offer them to the world, and that makes me happy. That any way a person can find to honestly face into profound life challenges, and with the help of others, as has been the case with me, including medications when I needed them, to find it possible not only to survive, but to thrive. And then to ask the question, how can I find meaning in this otherwise meaningless experience? And realize that the meaning of my own experience comes by offering it up to others. So dishonesty about who we are and what we're experiencing and what we're feeling, this kind of very limited public discourse we have where I'm brave and I'm courageous and that's the whole story, folks, which is sometimes a projection that gets put on people who write and speak in public, even if they don't want it. This is clogging up the whole conversation. And I love communities like this because they're like Drano, we unclog things so it can get flowing. I'm glad I picked that analog rather than some others. Just,
Lots of options.
common decency. Yeah. So there.
Thank you, Parker. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say also too, just thank you to Sharon and Parker for the reflections here, and also just for both sharing so deeply from your own experience in this moment. And that's also really, really deeply appreciated from you both, and the heartfelt nature of that. Claire, sorry, back to you.
No, I thank you for that. Sharon, wondered if you could walk us through a practice, coming back to, as you said, practicing kindness is so powerful. What might that look like, and could you guide us through that?
I would be very happy to. And Parker, who's like one of the world's great researchers, it seems, Naomi has a poem on happiness as well, which might be nice to also bring in if you want to find it for us.
Okay, I'll do it right now.
Thank you. And that maybe will be a way of actually, maybe Parker can read it because he'll have access to it and we don't have to send it to me.
Is it just called Happiness?
I think it's called On Happiness or Happiness, something like that.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I've got it. It's called So Much Happiness. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read
Yeah,
it.
do you mind reading it?
No, not at all. Thank you for the opportunity. So Much Happiness by Naomi Shihab Nye. It is difficult to know what to do with so much happiness. With sadness, there is something to rub against, a wound to tend with lotion and cloth. When the world falls in around you, you have pieces to pick up, something to hold in your hands, like ticket stubs or change. But happiness floats. It doesn't need you to hold it down. It doesn't need anything. Happiness lands on the roof of the next house, singing, and disappears when it wants to. You are happy either way. Even the fact that you once lived in a peaceful treehouse and now live over a quarry of noise and dust cannot make you unhappy. Everything has a life of its own. It too could wake up filled with possibilities of coffee cake and ripe peaches and love, even the floor, which needs to be swept, the soiled linens and scratched records. Since there is no place large enough to contain so much happiness, you shrug, you raise your hands, and it flows out of you into everything you touch. You are not responsible. You take no credit, as the night sky takes no credit for the moon, but continues to hold it and share it, and in that way, be known. Wow.
Thank you. So why don't we sit together for a few minutes, and I'm just cherishing that sense and that poem. So if you want to sit comfortably, you can close your eyes or not. Let your energy, your attention just settle into your body. Let's anchor attention, if possible, to something like the feeling of the breath, something that's happening anyway, so that there's just a quality of rest. Wherever you feel the breath most distinctly, nostrils, chest, or abdomen, it's happening anyway. And you can rest your attention gently, lightly on that area. See if you can feel one breath without concern for what's already gone by, without leaning forward for even the very next breath. Just this one. I know I was so frightened in my early practice that I was kind of mentally leaning forward to get ready for the next 50 breaths. And I used to say to myself, settle back. Let the breath come to you. I also used to say, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. Because I had so much performance anxiety, it's like I'd never done it before. So settle back. Let the breath come to you. You're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. And as images or sounds or sensations or emotions arise, if they're not very strong, if you can stay connected to the feeling of the breath, just let them flow on by. You're breathing. But if something comes up and it grabs you and you get spun out in thought, lost in a fantasy, or you fall asleep, pay careful attention to the next moment, because that's the moment we have the chance to be kind to ourselves. Instead of berating ourselves and being down on ourselves and blaming ourselves, you realize you've been distracted or you've been overwhelmed by something. See if you can let go gently. Notice the quality of kindness that's possible. Bring your attention back to the feeling of the breath. Wherever your attention might go for however long, it's okay. Notice how you speak to yourself when that moment comes where you realize you've been distracted. See whether you can let go gently and just start over. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Sharon, I wonder if you could also reflect with us on practices that you use to bring this more into your daily practice, small or more substantial ways that you remind yourself to be kind with yourself as well as others, and any reflections you might have on how we balance those moving into the next year.
Well, in terms of kindness toward others, I cherish those seemingly small opportunities. Like the email is a perfect example. Because it can make a difference in my day if I get an email that I think, what do they mean by that? Like, what are they trying to imply? And so having that as a guide, it's like the North Star by which I try to navigate a lot of activity. And for myself, I mean, one of the things is simple exercises like this. Listen to how I am speaking to myself when I've made a mistake, because the kindness toward ourselves, it's like self-compassion. It doesn't arise when I'm feeling triumphant. It arises when I've lost it in some way, and I've made a mistake or something like that, and to remember that this is not a weakness, this is a strength, this is not laziness, it's actually a way forward that's very effective. And then maybe just the last thing I do, which I've talked about here before, is that sometimes we say if you have a really like nasty inner critic, that's just like bringing you down, having you feel depleted and exhausted and unable to go on, maybe give it a name, give it a wardrobe, give it a persona, and then see how you relate to that persona. And so the object is not to just buy into it, like you're right, you're always right, and also not to feel ashamed and upset and freaked out. Like, I have just celebrated my 50th year of beginning meditation. That was January 7th. And, it's easy for me to say, you've been practicing for 50 years, for God's sake. Why is that voice still there? And so not falling into either of those extremes, or just, as I've said, and with apologies to anyone named Lucy, I named my inner critic Lucy based on the character in the Peanuts comic strip. And so I usually say, hi, Lucy, have a seat, have a cup of tea, something like that.
Thank you,
Thank
Sharon.
you.
Parker, do you have any reflections on this?
So just want to say that knowing that Sharon has been practicing meditation for 50 years and having followed her teachings for a long time, that makes me shockingly old, and I don't appreciate that at all. So I'm going to have to work on happiness again here, right here. So thanks, friend. So I think that laughing with others and at oneself is an antidote for whatever the opposite of happiness is, the illegitimate opposite. As I said earlier, I think sadness is a creative paradox with happiness. I think honesty with myself, even when it's very, very embarrassing. I've been doing a piece of writing lately about how how much I have learned from humiliation, and acknowledging humiliation, and being able to move beyond blaming it on other people and owning it for myself and saying again, yeah, that's me too. And if I can own that and incorporate it into my sense of self, I'm a lot happier, because it's the truth, and the truth will set a person free. I also, as a male, I think I've been slow over the years to recognize the role of my body in creating either happiness or its opposite. And so I try to take better care of my body than I used to. And at age 80, almost 82, that, and living in the frozen tundra of Wisconsin, where, you know, the wolves are roaming all the time, even in the neighborhood, and the streets are icy, I still get out for a walk. My wife and I get out for a walk of a mile and a half or so every day. And I love the discipline. I'm hooked on it now. It makes me happy to just see everything frozen and quiet and interesting the closer I look. So there's so much. I guess one more thing. I love Sharon's emphasis on small acts of kindness. That email that gets reviewed, and you realize that it's a little curt, and you might not speak to that person that way in person. I would make the same kind of comment about any form of generosity that I'm able to offer. Whether it's spending an hour on Zoom with a graduate student who's been reading one of my books and wants to talk about an issue of either personal or professional importance, or sending a little bit of my extra money to someone who really needs it. I had the good fortune to be raised by a father who just drilled into me and my sisters that any generosity we offered of material things or kindness to another person would come back to us many times over. And that's one of the truths that has proven out in my own life. And I feel the same way about generosity with regards to, I don't know how to say it, myself, my truth, my experience, no matter, without fear of how it may sound to another person. I guess at age 82, I'm a lot clearer, almost 82, I'm a lot clearer than I was in past years, that what will matter at the end has nothing to do with what other people thought of me. It has everything to do with what I think of myself. And that's a very clarifying point of view.
Thank you, Parker. I think at some point in the webinar series to come, we might ask this question again, and we may just have a chance that Parker might also share his love of greasy spoons and how that also is a route to happiness as part of this. And for those of us who don't know what a greasy spoon is, these are diners in the US that serve incredibly big, heavy breakfasts. And I'm thinking about this with a smile. So, and I'm going to use that as a segue just to take us into what we're really, really excited about over the next 10 months. And so we are collectively receiving an incredible gift of spending time with this wonderful, as Claire described it, dynamic duo of Sharon and Parker, and the magical interaction between the two to go through a journey that we've co-created together and with the dean of our inner development program at the Wellbeing Project, Nancy Nordefy, which explores different facets or key touchstones of the journey of inner work, or the inner journey. And first, we're tremendously excited about what's been organized. The arc that's been developed is something that will really build on itself each session. And so we'd love to encourage people being really committed to the series, because the idea is that piece by piece, this will make for a wonderful exploration of these different topics. Sharon and Parker will be joined in the sessions to come, well, in the sessions to come, by different guests coming from different places and sharing different things. There will be guests who share on modalities. There will be poets and artists. And there should be, while we're also going deep, a lot of laughter with the two of them. The way all of this is being curated is with reflections and homework as well, or home play with this, so that we can take some of this stuff deeper from each sessions. And we might also hold some reflection sessions where that makes sense. We'll be sharing a lot more about this in the next couple of weeks. So we're excited to welcome you to this journey and to know that we'll be taking this journey together over the next 10 months. Feels absolutely tremendous. And there's also just a huge amount of gratitude to Sharon and Parker for collectively working and Nancy Mortefi to collectively create this container for us. And so if you have any hopes or if there are things that are interesting to you in terms of this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. For those of you who are already on the mailing list, you can let us know. And if there are things that would be helpful or supportive as part of this journey, please let us know as well. And then just to share one last tiny thing, for questions that come up in these sessions, and we really do want to invite questions and feedback. If there are questions that are not answered, Sharon and Parker have wonderfully agreed to take those questions on board. And so we'll send out responses as well to any and all questions that people share here in such a heartfelt way. So just to know everything is being captured, and we'll come back on these to the larger group. So we're excited about this journey. This is the beginning of a new year. And Sharon, maybe we could invite you to close us out for today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all so much. So again, if you want to just sit comfortably, and I'd say allow in the joy, the joy of gathering, of having one another, of Naomi's poems, of the willingness in one's own heart to continue to learn and grow and actually feel that. Allow it in and let it suffuse you. And then having felt it, let's offer it. That sense of joy, of wholeness, of community, as a wish, as an aspiration for others, those who've helped us, first of all, whoever comes to mind, and whatever words come to your mind in making that offering. And to those whom you know are struggling in some way, may the good in your own experience serve as the fuel for your efforts to be present, to reach out. And then finally, to one another, as we co-create these experiences, all of us, each of us, may the good in my life be shared and dedicated to the happiness and well-being of all of you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And the way we've been signing off these is just inviting people to turn on their microphones and just say goodbye or thank you as they sign out. This way we can hear everyone's voices and just really hear the world around us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Aaron,
Very
Caroline.
good.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Danke
Everyone to
schön.
stay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Vielen Dank.
Bye, Sima. Talk to you tomorrow.
Farewell.
Bye-bye.
So long,
Very
farewell.
kind.
Everyone.
So much.
Thanks,
So
everybody.
lovely.
Bye,
So
everyone.
lovely.
Thank you.
Bye, Stephanie.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye. Keep
Bye
well.
bye.
Keep safe.